right, everyone, welcome. Thanks for joining us. So really quickly, so APA is a nonprofit trade organization built by photographers for photographers. We have chapters all across the country, and we have multiple events online and in person. And we're built to support photographers and educate them in any way we can, and provide as many resources as we can. Um, let's see here. So a few upcoming events. Here we go. So winning the bid with Carlene Martin has started actually today. Really excited about that. Um, Coming up though, we have a yoga workshop at the Incredible Yoga Studios. This will be really fun. We also do have mats and stuff that'll be distributed. So if you don't have any gear, like feel free to come out. We will take care of you. Um, Happy hour at Franklin Hall coming up Thursday, February 8th. The happy hours are always fun. And really excited about this 30 minutes with Noah Willman. He's got an incredible project that just dropped on Washingtonian at the Washingtonian. It's really awesome. Tune into that. And then, of course, the coffee break. Those are always fun. And then another 30 minutes with Anish Hoshlander, which should be really good. A few of the benefits that we have here, Union 206 Studios, we have a 50% discount, and we have membership discounts at all of these different companies. And I myself always forget that we have some really good discounts with like Nanook and rental houses around the area. So please look into that. We have a page online that will let you know what you can get. So enough of that. Let's jump into the actual presentation here. So Matt Dandy is a architectural photographer, a drone op, and a super incredible digitech. I think the amount of incredibly awesome projects this guy is on, that some he can talk about, some he might not be able to talk about, but it's like day in and day out, he's always on an incredible set, and it's always very impressive whenever I get a chance to work with him. So without further ado, let me introduce Matthew Dandy here.
Thank you for the introduction. Let me share screen real quick, get this started. All right, everybody can see that.
Yep.
Um, First of all, thank you for joining. Super honored that you guys are willing to hang out with me for half an hour during lunch break today. And listen to what I have to say. This is really awesome. Um, a lot of this talk is going to be kind of like starting from the beginning of my career. I sort of did a circular career arc. I went to art school, graduated, took up a full-time studio photo job. So straight out of college, I was shooting. I was shooting a lot of stuff like this. It was all basically was working in an auction house. It's product photography, stuff coming through that they were selling. We would knock it out kind of like as quick as possible. But coming out of college, it was a really one, it was a stable paycheck, which I would highly recommend for people in the freelance world. But it was a really good first introduction to shooting on my own. I was doing basically the lighting on my own. I was doing a rough amount of like prop styling and kind of like figuring out set design and stuff on my own. Um, so that was kind of my starting point. Um, and then left full time, uh, started working as an assistant, went freelance, and then kind of like over the past, I think I've been freelance for 8 years. Um, Kind of built a pretty wide-ranging variety of experience, which I'm going to share today. And I think kind of generally the point of my talk is just sort of being open to new opportunities as they come, because I've ended up doing a couple things that I never planned, sought out, even necessarily knew existed before having them shown to me. But so here's basically my photography starting point about a decade ago. Shooting a bunch of studio product stuff. it's 90% of it is like shoot on white, knock it out as fast as you can, really redundant, not super creative. But I did have some chances to do some kind of creative stuff. We would do catalog covers for each of the auctions that we had. And, you know, the catalog covers got to be pretty nice. So there was a few that I was really proud of. This was a whole collection of Civil War memorabilia that we sold. And so I'm in the studio. This is my very first lighting gear was a speed light and my camera starting super small. Had a couple gels that I could throw some colors on stuff, but you know, learning how to make interesting items um, out of just like the most basic gear by myself in the studio. Um, so I did that for about 4 years. And then kind of was getting restless, wanted to do something else, and I had a couple friends who were freelance photographers in the business, a few people that I had known from college and other things, and so I sort of reached out to them and was like, I had no idea what it was like out there, um, trying to get some feedback, and eventually made the jump, quit my full-time job. Um, Basically was unemployed for about 3 months. I would, you know, contact people whose work I liked, just introduce myself, say like, hey, I'm willing to come on set. I'm willing to help out. I think some of my first assistant jobs, I was doing a $75 day rate, you know, for like 2 hours. We were, you know, shooting somebody's headshots or a portrait or something. It would be really quick stuff. Basically, all of my involvement would be, you know, hold up a reflector, bounce some sunlight in, photographer shooting some pictures, and we'd be over before lunch and go home. And I was basically making no money doing this, but it was a start. I was on my way. Um, and something I found quickly was like, you know, as long as I was willing to, you know, show up, good attitude, and do whatever was asked of me, no matter kind of like how simple it was, people would bring me back on set, and I would get repeat work. This picture that you're looking at right now was, I think, probably my fourth or fifth assisting job ever. It was an Adidas swim swimwear shoot for an Olympic swimmer. I guess maybe two summer Olympics ago. Um, I knew the lighting stuff. I was not at all prepared for the gear when I first had this job. So definitely shout out to the guys from Serious Grip who were with me on that job for helping working me through. But you know, I was like, I knew reflectors, I knew how to like bounce light. But all of a sudden we're sinking reflectors to the bottom of a pool for an underwater camera to shoot back up and get it kind of like the swimmer under lid as you're looking back up towards the windows. And that was kind of my first jump in of oh man, like this is okay, this is different. This is a lot bigger than I was used to. This is a step up. And so for probably about 3 years, I worked pretty much 100% as a photo assistant. Um, and you know, it was a great way to learn gear. You know, you'd go on set with somebody new, and you know, they have different techniques, different ways to do stuff. Just being on set with people was a great learning experience and a wide variety of experience. I felt very lucky to I had a handful of photographers that I worked with very regularly, long-term relationships. Pretty much any job that they had, I would be on. And I really enjoyed that because you would get used to what their style was, and I kind of knew what they would do in a certain situation and what their expectations were, that I could essentially just go operate independently, light something that they needed, come back to them, maybe get some feedback, maybe make some tweaks, but um, essentially take on lighting gear like that was mine. I could handle it completely independently of the photographer. These photos I pulled just kind of a couple like really early like behind the scenes stuff. Um, Learning how to like throw some sunlight up on the shady side of a building. This is a high rise in Baltimore City overlooking the harbor. The other one was we're doing product photography and we needed a top-down shot, and it was way taller than any the tripod that we had. So we rigged up the second floor stand arm out of some stands, and we're shooting these big product laydowns. Um, so I definitely started at like my first assisting jobs. I did a lot of product photography, then branched out to sort of more on location stuff. This is another photographer that I worked with for a really long time and really enjoyed working with. We were doing kind of really stylized. It was food. This particular job was kind of this cooking over a campfire, farm to table sort of job where the shot on the left that you can see, it's overcast day, but we need kind of some nice lighting on the food. So, essentially it was building a black box, so we had a little bit of shape versus having this like just really, really soft, no direction, cloudy light. Um, just kind of building stuff out of what we have to make a big white bounce, soften some of the shadows and stuff. Um, so that was kind of some of my first experiences of doing a lot of these shoots out on location. And somewhere along the line, I got picked up by Under Armour. Under Armour had a in-house studio that no longer exists, unfortunately. It was on their campus in Baltimore. They did this like really a bunch of kind of like really in-depth stylized work for some of their campaigns. And I would say this is kind of like second step number two of entering the Under Armour world and being like, again, oh man, this is far more gear than I've ever seen on location or in a studio. Um, new learning experiences. So when I first started out at Under Armour, I was assisting. We would do, a lot of uniforms on athletes. The picture in the top left was, I think that was for a college football championship. It was one of their football cleats with champagne spraying all over it for a championship victory. Um, this was another one of my favorite shoots at the old studio. We did the Navy football uniforms for Army Navy football. Um, Shot that against a blue screen. Obviously, there's a lot of post-production on these. Um, but learning all that gear, learning to light it, having all that gear at my disposal was great learning experience, great class. Um, this photo, we had the Olympic bobsled team in right before the Winter Olympics. So, squad pick had to, while we were setting up, and you need to test the lights beforehand. So we had to get in front of the camera, in front of the bobsled, and make sure all the lighting looked good. So that was the Under Armour squad for UA bobsled. Um, and then Under Armour basically taught me how to digitech initially. That was kind of one of my big transitions from assistant to digitech. And we didn't have a digitech a lot in the studio, but there'd be some jobs where they would need one, and Under Armour would often hire a digitech coming down from New York. So great people to learn from. Um, I will say the first handful of jobs that I worked on with the digitech, it kind of threw me off a little bit because the photographer would be shooting and the digitech would have feedback of um, a lighting change that we needed to make, or just any tweaks, any changes that have to do with the shoot while you're shooting. And it caught me off guard at first because I was like, I feel like this should come from the photographer, or we should ask for approval or something. But I kind of quickly learned that with a digitech on set, I mean that was their role. That the super basically a digitech is there to make sure the files go to the right place. They're in focus, they get backed up, nothing gets lost at the end of the day. But they're also essentially become the point person that while the photographer is interacting with the subject, um, taking photos, the digitech can essentially take over and handle everything else. Background during the shoot, directing crew, solving issues. They're going to be the first person to see if a light is too hot or it needs to change direction or something. Um, so that was kind of my first introduction to what a digitech would do. And Under Armour, I think realized they didn't necessarily need to pay people to come down from New York, so had asked me, was I interested in learning how to digitech? I didn't necessarily at first think that sitting at a computer was more interesting than doing the lighting. The lighting seemed more fun, but a digitech paid better. So all right, I'm open to what you're saying. Um, so Under Armour was essentially my transition to teching, and really kind of like building my career going into that. This is I just pulled a little set from a past Under Armour job that we did. Let me see if this video will play. Um, this was basically to solve the shot that we wanted was athletes, their shoe very like large in frame, sky above them, like no setting, just shooting straight into the sky. And so to accomplish that, we ended up building out essentially a black box. There's a glass surface that the athlete could stand on. Photographers inside the box, so you don't get any reflections on the bottom of it, and the athlete can kind of jump around to do movements. Um, and we did. So that stuff looked pretty cool, I thought. Here's a couple other assistant jobs that I was been on. So kind of as I was going along, a lot of the lighting and stuff got way more intense. This was on location on a basketball court. We needed this really moody lighting, a spotlight. So shooting through a gobo to cast the spotlight on a basketball player, on the athlete. Um, this picture on the right, um, is a shoot where we are shooting for a dot company. And that was like kind of that was interesting because, you know, getting to situations where you don't have, outside the dock is all water and we can't light from there. So trying to figure out different techniques of, we did want a little bit of light on the subject, hiding it under an umbrella so that the people walking on the dock would have nice light on them, but there's no equipment and frame when you look at it. Um, this is another different shoot that I was on. We were doing automobile shoots in the studio. That was another kind of like completely different. I never shot automobiles before. I'm used to pointing lights at the subject. If you ever do automobiles, things with reflective surfaces, uh, you end up lighting everything around the subject and then letting it fall on the automobile rather than lighting it in a way that I was used to. So that was a good learning experience. Um, and then here's I wanted to share just kind of like I thought a hopefully interesting networking story to connect these two pictures that seem to have nothing to do with each other. The one on the left is Under Armour gear. It's nighttime reflective running gear. We shot this on the streets of Baltimore. I think it was a 2 day shoot, and we were shooting like 8 p.m. to 4 in the morning, overnight. A lot of fun, but not necessarily good for my sleep schedule. Um, so I digitech this Under Armour job on the left, and because we're out on the street and nothing necessarily was open at that time of night, a lot of times productions will bring in a mobile home. Basically, that's our home base. You have a bathroom, you have a place to change, and the she's a local lady that used to be in production a lot more regularly, semi-retired, has a mobile home, offers it to production. She's kind of knows what the setup is because she'd been in the industry a long time. And so while I'm on this job for a couple days, I basically just chatted with her a couple times, go in the bathroom, say like, hey, how's it going? We had talked to each other, and she ended up asking for my email address on one of the last days of the shoot. So I gave her we traded contact information, and I didn't hear anything from her, for probably 6 months. And then a job came through town. It was at a hotel in Middleburg, Virginia. Ad agency photographer, all the crew was out of town people, but they needed a couple local hires to help out. Um, she had known the producer on that job from previous jobs in the past and reached out to me initially to digitech the job. I was happy to do it. It was, I think, 4 days. And right before it was maybe a week before the job, she called and said, "Hey, actually, like, there's there was a little bit of a mix up. They're bringing a Digitech with them from out of town. We still need assistance though. We would love for you to be an assistant." I kind of thought about it a little bit. I wasn't super happy that all the gear rental I would have gotten as a Digitech was gone. I was taking a lower rate as a photo assistant. And I think one thing as a freelancer you do a lot of times weigh the work you're being offered against the work that you might potentially be able to get in the future. So I thought about it, and it wasn't my favorite thing, but I was like, it sounds like a fun shoot. I'll be on as an assistant. I'm happy to still work it. So I was working this hotel job in Middleburg. Um, they ended up adding on one additional day to the shoot at the end of the shoot for just additional content that the client wanted. And the Digitech who was on the job wasn't able to do that last day. He had to travel back home. So I was already on the job. I was like, hey, I'm happy to add a day. I'm happy to switch positions. I'll Digitech for the day. And that day went swimmingly. They seemed to enjoy working with me. I enjoyed working with them. Everybody left. They went home, and the photographer called me back a little bit after that and was like, "Hey, we liked working with you. Would you be willing to travel?" I said, "Absolutely." And so this leads to the second picture of me with all my gear in Montego Bay, Jamaica, at a resort shooting for the same client with the same crew. and being internally grateful that I had not declined that assisting job, and also that I had just happenstance had a conversation with somebody on the Under Armour job. This was probably like a year in between these two jobs, but direct connection between somebody I had a chat with and then work that came my way. What happened in Montego Bay, Jamaica was a lot of what we were shooting was lifestyle, people hanging out at the resort, but they had this new part of the resort that was opening that they were looking to just have a couple architectural photos for. And that wasn't necessarily, I'm sure the crew that I was working with would have done a great job. But just on a call, I was like, hey, I that was sort of my sweet spot was I really like doing architecture stuff. So I was like, listen, if you want me to take point on this kind of subset of the photography that we were doing in Jamaica, I'm happy to. So here is a little behind the scenes picture of me taking an early morning shot of their brand new building. This went up on their website. Was super proud of that photograph and getting used. The downside of this was that this section of the resort was opening in March 2020. We were there. We were down there in February 2020 shooting it. It was, I think, like March 3rd or something like that. Not at all a good time to have a brand new wing of your 5-star expensive resort open. Um, but that leads me to this. This is the COVID era of my career. I think one of my first digitech jobs back after, probably it was probably 4 months of no work before people kind of figured out um what we had to do to be able to work safely during COVID, testing, masking. As you can see, we're all standing really far apart trying to take interesting photos. Um, this might not be the case for everybody, but I will say COVID was actually really, really beneficial to my career. And I'll explain that. I'll explain that statement as we go along. Um, so COVID basically at that point I was pretty busy. I was doing good. I was making a good amount of money and like working on jobs that I really liked. Um, I didn't necessarily have any time to like stop and reconsider, like plan, try something different. So COVID having basically that forced stop to me worked out really, really well. So we came back from COVID and there was a couple different ways that it helped me out. One, Digitex became more important on jobs that otherwise wouldn't have necessarily needed them because people were no longer, traveling. Like the art directors weren't necessarily flying in. What we did a lot of times was, we'd have a photographer and a small crew, and then all the creative directors would be still at home watching over Zoom. So Digitech became really important to kind of be that connection between set and the people who couldn't necessarily travel. So Digitech's jobs became more important. The other thing I did was kind of reassessed like the work that I wanted to do, that if I was going to go on set and, kind of risk my health for working these jobs, I really wanted them to be the jobs that I was interested in, that I wanted to do. So I kind of stopped taking sort of some of the jobs I wasn't that interested in, the jobs that I felt were maybe too easy Didn't challenge me. I didn't necessarily like I wanted to learn something on pretty much every job that I was on. So starting to decline those jobs, then as things picked up and got busy again, maybe a year later, I had more free days on my schedule to accept the jobs that I really, really wanted to. And then the third thing that I did with a bunch of my free time was learn to fly drones. I actually, this was again kind of something that I never necessarily sought out. Um, Fell into my lap a little bit. I had a buddy who had initially bought this drone. He's a graphic designer, not necessarily a photographer. But he had bought it for fun to mess around with. Had it for a couple months, decided he didn't really need it anymore, and so he was getting rid of it. So I bought a drone off of him. Um, I didn't necessarily have any intention to like be a drone guy, but I knew for architecture, interior design kind of stuff, stuff I was already interested in shooting. Just putting a camera up in the air, you get new perspectives, and was I thought a worthwhile addition to some of the stuff that I was already doing. So um, not working over COVID also gave me the time to study for the Part 107, get my drone flying license, and essentially add that to my business that I could offer people drone work. So by the time I was doing some more of these like resort projects and stuff, that this is for a winery in Temecula, California. We were, up early in the morning in the hills above the winery where they have some vineyards, flying drones over them, catching early morning light. Um, so that was something that I thought like was really beneficial, just sort of having that hard stop, a little bit of free time to kind of digest what I was doing, what I wanted to do going forward, and the ability to learn some additional tools to add to my arsenal. So, I like staying busy, I like doing the work, but definitely recommend if you have that free time, kind of stepping aside, reassess your business. Um, I'll share just a couple different like digitech stories. Um, just some like cool shoots that I got to work on. This again was at a studio in DC for one of Michelle Obama's book covers. I was doing lighting on this job, tons and tons of gear. Once again, this kind of like next step up in production levels was a really fun experience learning how to light from, pretty famous, well-known photographers. Um, Here's some other Under Armour stuff, just lighting these like really big spaces. This is constant lighting versus strobe lighting, but just kind of like fun challenges. If you're in a gym and you basically need the whole gym as a working space versus trying to hit one specific spot, how best do you light it and go about this? So, we're flying 16 by 16, bouncing lights into them. Um, I don't have anything that big in my personal arsenal. But during my career, I've noticed that uh, I was able to acquire gear that I wanted for my own photography by kind of like seeing what was useful to other photographers that I was working for, that I could have my own lighting gear rented back to people. So, this is a studio shoot on a smaller scale, but a photographer can come to me and say like, "Hey, we want you to digitech it, handle all the lighting. You're bringing all the gear. I'm just going to show up with a camera." And take photos. And I have the ability to show up on set and essentially handle that for a photographer, take that off their plate. Uh, if anybody's hockey fans out there, that this is two kind of fun jobs I did. This is Tom Wilson from the Washington Capitals. He was actually like extremely invested in the shoot that they were taking. It was off ice hockey apparel. But he came over because he wanted to see some of the photos, and so I was chatting with him at the computer. And after looking through, he decided, he didn't feel like he posed right. He didn't think they looked as cool as he could have. So he was actually the one who wanted to jump back in front of the camera and try it a second time. And then this is another job for the Philadelphia Flyers. If anybody knows Gritty, that their mascot, we photographed Gritty, but this was while I was working. He just popped up on set and was staring at me. Um, Couple other I like taking pictures of essentially my digitech gear in fun locations. This is one. We were on the helipad of Hopkins Hospital looking over the Baltimore skyline. And as I moved from digiteching in the studio where everything's kind of set for you. It's a repeatable process. Uh, Now a lot of times we're essentially taking studio amounts of gear, big production, but going on the road. So how can I keep a computer, monitors for the clients, um, battery power, everything while we're out on location, moving around. So Digitech now becomes, I have a ton of gear with me on these locations. Shooting sports outside. You can see kind of some of the background amount of equipment that goes into some of these jobs. Uh, the photo on the right was kind of a fun challenge. We needed we needed a client monitor, completely battery powered to be able to roll around the field on because we were moving around a bunch during this day on the shoot. And so it was like how to figure out like it couldn't be tethered to me because I was moving independently. The monitor needed to go someplace else completely across the way. So figuring out a solution of monitor, build a sunshade. The entire thing is battery powered. It's wirelessly HDMI connected to my laptop so that it can move independently. It can go completely across the football field and people can still look at images. Just another couple like fun. Um, when putting together the slideshow, I noticed that a lot of my BTS pictures of me teching is kind of quiet moments of waiting because when we're actually shooting stuff, I don't have time to step aside and shoot BTS. But it's definitely taken me to cool locations. This is Audi Field, Station North Tool Library in Baltimore. Sometimes we don't go with a big kit at all. It's less glamorous. This one I just thought was kind of funny because I had taken my laptop back to the Apple store that I had bought it from to work a job at the Apple store. So, took it home, I guess. And then this other picture on the right is cold day on the streets of Baltimore, just me in a fold-up chair with my laptop doing work. Um, but having a good time. And then this is basically my current pivot. The past couple of years, I've done more shooting work. I primarily focus on architecture, interior design stuff. This was a party boat on DC, the Potomac waterfront that we did a shoot for. This was a little bit of drone, interiors on the boat, and then from their little that's a picture of us on their little side boat, getting sunset with the monuments behind us. This is a lot of what I work on currently. This is a townhouse in Washington, D.C. showing off the bathroom. I really love so as I kind of switched roles from digitech or I used to do lighting and assistant on a lot of these like similar projects. Now as a shooter, I still just really like the collaborative effort. I have somebody with me doing lighting. There's usually a stylist on there. This was my buddy Mike Grady who did a really awesome bubble bath and got everything looking beautiful for this interior project. And then I had just kind of like a couple tear sheets. This was something recently, Annapolis home project that got published in a magazine. I always love the photography is always fun, but seeing in a final form with text going out, I really like. This is some drone stuff that I did in Aspen, Colorado. This was about a year ago, so seeing my work on their website is super rewarding. And then going forward, I would say kind of my next thing that I'm trying to learn is um, shooting drone kind of eased me into there was a couple times I was shooting stills on the drone. I'm primarily a stills photographer. But while I was up in the air, people have asked me to shoot video for certain projects. So shooting video on the drone kind of then led me into learning, all right, I guess I should learn some video editing, get into that. So my next frontier to add to the arsenal, shooting more video on projects like that going forward. And that's uh that's the end of my slideshow. Happy to take some questions. Lewis, you got anything for me?
Yeah, I actually have a few of my own that I would love to ask.
Sounds
Actually,
good.
well, so first, you have a lot of experience, and I wanted to say, like, I wanted to ask, like, what in your opinion is, because for my own curiosity, what is like the hardest genre of photography to photograph, in your opinion?
Ooh. Um, I think I would that's a tough question because every different one has its unique challenges. I think from my experience on the job, uh, when we've been photographing somebody who's famous or really important has a bunch of other like for everybody on the crew, this photo shoot is the most important thing that is happening today, but meeting people who this is like completely they have tons more important stuff to do, might only have 10, 15 minutes on set. How to get in there, prepare for things going wrong, things changing during the day, and just being able to like problem solve on the fly, switch lanes. There was a job for National Geographic. This was maybe like 2 years ago that a ton of prep work went into. We did a ton of lighting on. Um, the subject was not at all into just kind of like the vibe of the shoot.
Yeah.
And so day of was scrap everything we had planned for, plan something new on the fly. And honestly, like it was kind of fun. I enjoy those challenges, but um, that can be sort of some of the toughest challenges when dealing with people that stuff has to happen really quick and stuff has to happen at a really high level.
Mm. Hmm. Yeah, I think I remember what job you're referring to. That was a very
Yes.
interesting one. Yeah,
Yes.
that was cool, man. I was gonna say I think that at least for me, I think that product is like can be one of the hardest things. Like I think the first few shots sometimes you can well I think you started with product, so maybe that's a easier lane for you. But man, there was one in particular which broke me years ago. And I was like, man, I don't know if I could do this. But honestly, I thought automotive was going to be difficult, but I found that to be fun in a way when I was assisting on automotive stuff. And I was like, oh, this is actually kind of interesting. But But yeah, so let's jump into the chat here. I think I saw a few questions. Oh, George, he says, where do you recommend those trying to jump from assisting to digital tech in, looking for more training? Like, is there a pipeline or a way to do that?
Yeah, there is in fact that there are so I would say studio photography um is kind of the best way to do that. Like the Under Armour Creative Studio where I learned isn't there anymore, but they still have a big ecom studio. There's always studio photography. If you're an assistant kind of looking to make that step up, uh those I think are the places that I would look because a lot of times they have their own gear. You don't necessarily need to have like a full package of stuff that you've invested in already. They have a workflow already that you can kind of learn on the job. You don't necessarily have to go into it like needing to know all the specifics of the tech side of it, like backup software, capture software, how to run like all the accessories and stuff. So I would say like that's I think still a good starting point. The the one downside is, in my experience, some of those don't pay necessarily like the best rates. Um, but jobs that you can learn on, I think are super, super valuable, even if you're taking a little bit of less money to do them. And then once you kind of get comfortable with the setup, branching out on your own, always just kind of try to like add new things to your and I mean even if you're just like an assistant on a shoot that has a digitech, chatting with them. It's been a while. I don't do a ton of assisting anymore, but like occasionally if I do and get out there and like there is a digitech on the job, I'm always like scoping out their gear, trying to like what do you do that's different than what I'm used to doing? Do you have anything that looks cooler than what I have or is an interesting technique? So just kind of even before you're in the role, getting out there, meeting some people, observe how they do their job, what they use to do the job, and then kind of you can slowly build your kit that way. And I will say I didn't spend a ton of time talking on acquiring gear. I remember Pete Grill did a lot of that, so I didn't want to double up on that, but happy to answer questions as needed. Um, it's a lot of investment to start, but renting it back to people on jobs, you can recoup your investments pretty quickly, and it's a good way to add to your day rates and the money you're making by having gear that you can supply to people that they don't need to go to rental houses, they don't need to pick it up themselves. You can say, I'm on set, I've got it covered.
Yeah. Okay. I got another question here from Rob. How hard is the 107 exam?
So study, I'll give you two answers on this. Studying for it, I was kind of terrified. Um, because it's a small pilots. They haven't really differentiated drones from small aircrafts yet. So a good chunk of what I needed to learn was reading aerial maps, how to talk to air traffic control if you're in a busy air traffic control environment. Um, stuff that like I wouldn't say is handy to know, but I was like, I'm hopefully not encountering this at all while flying my drone. If I need to be on the phone with air traffic control, coordinating where my drone is versus where a plane is, I've done something wrong. Um, so daunting to start, but then the test itself actually wasn't that bad.
Okay. Good to know. Good to know. Um, this is an interesting one here, from Amanda. If you had one piece of advice or more for lighting interior spaces, what would it be?
Ooh. Um, one piece of advice for lighting interiors. Um, I guess learning to take advantage of bouncing light rather than doing it directly. Interiors, a lot of times you're like working in small spaces, you're backed up to a wall. And there's not a lot of room to put big gear in. So some of the like techniques that I first learned was, how to shoot a light into something so that I'm using that like softer reflected light coming back into the space. Um, in interiors there's a lot of different techniques. I would say I light a fair bit of my stuff, but I know some people don't. And that's kind of been my go-to for like I want everything to look really my style is really naturally lit. I don't necessarily want it to look like I did a ton of work. I just want it to look really good. So figuring out how to light in really t small spaces, taking advantage of, if there's white walls in the room, that's handy. If not, how to build a white wall, bounce lights into it, soften it with scrims has kind of been my that's the basic starting point of a bunch of my lighting.
Right on. Yeah, if there's like a white ceilings, I'm like, if we're like coming down a crunch time, like we need to light this pretty evenly. Like I'm just bouncing something in the ceiling, and it
Yeah.
rains down nice and even. Yeah,
And that t technique's like yeah, that doesn't apply just to interiors. Shooting people inside, how to get soft light in a small space, I think can be challenging, but is very worthwhile.
right on. Yeah. So I had another one here from Sarah. These photographers that you assisted for, were they all based in DC or other parts of the country?
When I first started out, the ones that I worked with long term were Baltimore and DC. Um, I feel really fortunate to have kind of like that long term relationship to um, you know essentially build my skills underneath somebody whose work I really like, work I respected, and then kind of have that they have the trust in me that I can go off, do the job, and it'll be roughly what they want. So yeah, if you're just starting out assisting, reaching out to people whose work you really like, and then learning from them, working with them a lot. I mean, I've worked a ton of jobs on stuff I had no interest in doing myself, but even those, learn a new technique, meet somebody new. I feel like pretty much every job you're on, you can take something from.
Yeah, I agree. So I have another question that I wanted to, because you touched on this a little bit. You said make sure you take note of the new opportunities that come your way. Because I agree with that so much because the some of the randomest gigs that came my way, and I'm like, well, I don't know if I really fit this, have sometimes led to some really interesting opportunities that I would never have thought of. And they
Sure.
come out of nowhere. But can you just kind of touch on like potentially one of those experiences or like why that really sunk into you a lot, that message?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, certainly, kind of the networking story that I told of meeting people on the streets of Baltimore that led me to shooting in Jamaica. Um, I've there's jobs that I've worked on, like if somebody from out of town comes in, I'm the local hire on something. They leave town, and I'm like, I may never see that person again. Um, but just by kind of like showing up on set, trying to be good at my job, being friendly if something goes wrong, handling it with with a good frame of mind, not getting frustrated, just kind of making the best of what we have. Um, that then helps build your reputation to places that you never necessarily know that it would go. I've definitely had people reach out to me who I've never met before and say, "Hey, you recommended by this person." I'm like, "I've never met that person either." But somehow got my name from friends of friends from a job that I worked on in the past that, even if it was a one-off and I didn't really think of anything of it, just being able to show up on set, do the job, and then that'll come back to you in ways that you never necessarily expect.
Yeah, no, 100%. I agree with that. There's sometimes you get hit up for a job from someone that you worked with years ago and dropped off the face of the planet, but like, it the industry is so small, even though it feels really large at times, like everyone knows somehow, or everyone knows someone in a different way. So, um,
Oh, for sure. And to add on that, I would say also, like especially if you're working crew people, don't necessarily see other crew as your competition for jobs. I there's a couple other like digitechs in the DC area who are great people, and I actually really like hanging out with them because you can create ideas. We can kind of figure out like, hey, like is the market appropriate for what we're charging for gear rental or talking to people. And then if I'm busy and have jobs I can pass along, I have friends who do that job that I'm happy to give work to, and they're happy to give it back to me. So I've definitely always been invested in kind of sharing the wealth, being friends with everybody, not seeing other people as your competition for work.
oh, absolutely. Being nice and kind to people goes a very long way. Um, well, so I think we've hit our time limit here, but thank you again, Matt. I think this is a really the hybrid approach to jobs, I think, is so important, especially to people just starting out right now. So I have millions of more questions that could take up 3 more hours, but we're not going to do that to everyone. So thanks again for taking the time out to present today.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
All right, and we've also dropped Matt's website and Instagram in the chat. Feel free to check out more of his work there. Thank you all for taking the time out of your days here to check us out.